Namaste, Heart to Heart, Volume 2. These are the talks and questions and answers from the proceedings of the seminars of Sahaj Marg, September-October 1987, France, Madagascar, Switzerland, given by Sri Parthasarathi Rajgopalachari. This is Volume 2. We now continue with the fifth talk in this series, the third person, given on September 4th, 1987 in the evening. There was something Cloud said this morning in his really very nice speech. Many might have taken it as a joke, and of course, in a particular context, it could be embarrassing too. I refer to his statement to his marriage to Anna was really a marriage of three persons. Anna, himself, and the person he considers as his master. But knowingly or unknowingly, he has revealed a great truth. There is always a third person in all of our activities. You know, it's a funny thing that in English, in the grammar part of it, there is a thing called the third person singular, he. When you capitalize it, it means God. He is singular in the sense there is nobody like him. He is the only one, and he is the third person in this sense, that wherever we are two, he is there as the third. In fact, there is a tradition in South India, in the Vaishnavite tradition, about a famous Brahmin saint. He was lying in a small room, sleeping in a small room, which could hold only one person lying down. Then a friend came and knocked on the door, who said, "I have nowhere to go. Can you give me some place?" The saint said, "Where one can lie down, two can sit. Please come." After half an hour, there was again a knock on the door, and another person came and said, "I have no place to go. Will you allow me here?" The saint said, "Where two persons can sit, three can stand. Come in." You all know that is how we travel in trains in India, jam-packed. Because this same principle applies in the practical life, then comes the miracle part of the story, that there was again a knock on the door and one more person wanted entry. Now the owner said, "My dear friend, where one could sleep, two could sit, so I allowed the second person. Then when the third person came and knocked, I said, where two can sit, three can stand, and allowed him to." Now you have come, I do not see how, where three can stand, a fourth can be accommodated. Then the fourth person answered, "Wherever there is a place for you, there is place for me. And when two people gather in my name, I am the third person there. But even if you are million people and you are tight in a room, I don't take up any place. For me, there is always room." So you see, that is the tradition, that wherever we are, he is also there. And in fact, in certain business communities in India, this idea has been brought down to the level of normal human practice, and if there are two partners in a business signing a partnership agreement, they include God as a third partner, even in the agreement itself, and give him a token share, which money they donate to some temple or something. Unfortunately, it is not out of any spiritual recognition of this fact that they do this. It is only to ensure that their business runs well. But whatever be the cause, the truth is there embedded in this corrupt practice. Let us say that we cannot avoid the presence of the third person, singular. He is alone. So, it is a peculiar thing that in the grammar, he is called the third person singular. So, in all our marriages, in fact, in anything that we do, Indian tradition recognizes God as the permanent witness to everything that we do. Most people forget this. Now, Cloud, I am happy, caught this aspect of the teaching and gave it enough importance to remember it in his speech. I think he was quite serious about this, and therefore his marriage will be blessed one. So let us always endeavor to keep this hidden presence with us. Now that is the religious part of the story. When we come to spirituality, we don't treat God as an external presence who is with us, looking after us, watching us from the outside. The goal of Sahaj Marg, the whole spiritual exercise, is an exercise to interiorize Him. Therefore, one of the famous Upanishads, the Isha Upanishad, says, it is very small Upanishad, incidentally, it says, He is there in the heart of everything. He pervades the entire creation. You cannot avoid Him. Whether you like it or not, He is inside you. He is outside you. In explaining this particular opening phrase of the Upanishad, the commentators use a beautiful image or an example. They say it is like a pot of water floating on the river. There is a water inside the pot, there is water outside the pot. But water in the pot thinks it is individual. It has its own existence, it is a self. Break the pot and the water becomes one. So, what does this really imply? It implies that this body of ours is what gives us our individuality, our feeling of separateness, the feeling I and mine. So, spirituality says, don't break the shell. Unlike the commentator of the Upanishad, it says, put him inside yourself in your heart. In fact, he is there already. Recognize his presence and feed yourself to him by thinking of him constantly. So, the exercise to think of him constantly is what we try to achieve by thinking of him occasionally in meditation. In fact, when I first asked Babuji, what is the purpose of these 3 or 4 sittings that you give to new Abhyasis? He said, it is to clean. I said, clean you what? The standard answer, grossness. I asked him, why cleaning of the grossness? Then he told me it is like one of these oil lamps in the past which had a glass chimney. It had become coated with black soot so thick that the light could not come outside. In a similar fashion, with our grossness, we have completely enclosed the divine light burning in our hearts. And even though the light is inside us, we cannot see it, we cannot perceive it, we cannot even feel it. Babuji added, if I ask you to meditate and you cannot see the light, though it is not a visible light that I expect you to see, nevertheless, if there is a barrier between it and yourself, it will block your efforts at meditation. Therefore, I have to clean it sufficiently for you to be able to perceive the reality hidden in your heart. So this is what is done during the first 3 or 4 sittings or sometimes 22 sittings, as Babuji said. You see the importance of the 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 preliminary cleaning sittings. You know, we travel by train, we sit in our houses. When it is warm inside and cold outside, there is moisture on the glass panes of the windows. You cannot see outside, nor can you see from outside inside. The thin nest film of moisture deposited on glass. Then we have to clean the pane and only then we are able to see. So this is a corporeal or a mundane example of the necessity to clean before vision becomes possible. The same principle is applied to the spiritual existence. So the cleaning is of the utmost importance in Sahaj Marg. Then Babuji added a peculiar statement. He said, there are some cases which are so gross, where the grossness is so hard like a rock, that short of breaking up the grossness, like breaking a stone with hammer, nothing can be done. So I asked, What do you do in such cases? Babuji said, if I do that, the man will die. When I asked him, is there no hope for such persons? He said, if you don't do what the Guru asks them or the Master asks them to do, they may have to take several more births and clear up this grossness by bhog or by undergoing the effects of the sanskara, and then again seek the assistance and the guidance of the qualified person. I said, what is it that they have to do which the master says they should do? Because they cannot meditate, they cannot do cleaning. The 10 maxims have no meaning for them because they are not abhyasis. He said, if they take the prayer which I give them and repeat it once first thing in the morning on waking up and once last thing before going to sleep, which a sincere heart, seeking prayerfully the guidance of the Lord Himself, with a thirst in their heart for spiritual emancipation, then in some way this grossness begins to dissolve, and sometimes even in a few months they become fit for spiritual practice. So you see, that is the importance of an abhyasi or a prospective abhyasi who at the moment cannot possibly start practice. Because of this enormous load of grossness surrounding his heart, praying for his own liberation, not liberation in the spiritual sense, but freedom from grossness, so that he becomes fit to begin in spiritual practice. We unfortunately get some cases like this, get some people like this, and is it difficult to convince them that at the moment they cannot possibly start practice. Only this afternoon I had a very angry young man. He could not understand how others were fit and he was not fit. At the time, I didn't have the time to explain or discuss all this. Now at least many people will hear the same thing, you see, and if that young man is here, I request him to understand one thing. There is no rejection or personal criticism that one is not fit. It is only that it takes a little more time for him to be fit, and he should have the patience to wait, the faith to pray, and the thirst or the hunger for spirituality necessary to these things. If he becomes angry or disappointed, or questions the judgment of the guide from superficial attitudes to this thing, that is, that if all these people are fit, how am I not fit? There is the danger that he may never find the way. That is a small danger. The bigger danger is he will go on adding to his sanskaras in such a fashion that 100 future lives he may not become fit again. Now coming back to Cloud's third person. It is to him we are appealing when we pray, because like it or not, he is in my heart, and though the grossness surrounding that light may be or so thick that I cannot see him or perceive him or hear his voice, fortunately for us, nothing in this universe can prevent him from hearing me, listening to me, seeing me. That is the greatest generosity of this third person, you see. It is like one of those one-way mirrors where you cannot see from one side, but they can see from out other side. Now some persons may ask, why not pray to the Master under such circumstances? After all, in Sahaj Marg, you have been saying your Master is God. What is the difference? There are two very big answers to this question. The first answer is, you have to do what the Guru asks you to do if you accept him, and not argue with him. One never argues with the Master on any subject. Obedience is the test of an abhyasi. The second thing is, he is still a Master. He is not yet God to you. In fact, to many persons, he is not even a Master. Lie is another human being, you see. So first you have to accept him as human guide and accept his advice and do what he says. If this step is undertaken successfully, there comes the possibility of seeing him as your master. At that stage begins your real spiritual practice. Till then, it is all mechanical, you see. Now, when he has become your master, you start your spiritual practice in right earnest. Now, he is the master and I am his servant. And with this attitude, when we proceed on our spiritual path, devotion grows, love grows, and finally, when we are able to see him as nothing different from the God that is within me, then we have the right and the authority to say he is God. Then it no longer becomes important whether we pray to God or pray to Master. They are the same. At the stage, it no longer matters whether the Master is outside or inside. In fact, the interior Master becomes preferable because he is permanent. He is eternal in my heart. He will be with me throughout eternity. The external Master is sure to disappear, you see. So, this is the miracle of Sahaj Marg's spiritual system, that even though there is this person always present in the heart, he has been present ever since the dawn of creation, whether I was a blob of mineral or an animal or a plant or a vegetable, anything. He was there inside me. Yet you have to see him outside, accept him outside. I have him outside, surrender to him outside, and then miraculously find him inside. Me along, he has been there, and we have been foolish enough not to perceive, recognize, and surrender to him inside. So, this is the fundamental way in which I think spirituality differs from religion and goes beyond religion, because religion has always prayed to a God outside, external to us, maybe in temple, maybe in church, maybe in heaven somewhere. So the gods of religion are removed from us in time and space until the mystics came. In all religions, they were there and they were able to transcend the limitations of their own religions, and in a mystic act of tremendous courage and even more extraordinary faith, they were able to say, he is here in my heart. Why should I go to a temple? Why should I go to a church? Why should I go anywhere? Let me sit and commune with him who is inside me, eternally present. And then as this communication grew in strength, the inner voice took over, the inner light took over, and the outer person virtually ceased to exist. The true mover of the self becomes the higher self inside. So such a person is God controlled, God driven, God moved. In fact, God is now the life inside this person. And then we find the tremendous miracle, which is so remarkable, which is so grand. We can hardly conceive of it, that a mere human being who started a spiritual practice has now become divinized or like God himself. This is the culmination of the process of divinization under the Sahaj Marg system. So you see how we start with the third person outside, then bring the third person inside and find we are that third person himself ultimately. Of course, it is a very troublesome thing to have this third person inside you, because he is a witness to everything that we do, we see, we speak, we hear, all the things. Therefore, the tragedy that even people who have recognized this truth have run away from this. And that is the manifestation of the utmost stupidity and foolishness in the human being. Because by running away from the truth, you cannot run away from him. Where can you run leaving him behind? This is the tragedy. This is the foolishness of the atheist, of the sinner who wants to run away from God because of his guilt complex, and instead of saying, my Lord, I am what I am, but you are still inside me. You are the benevolent enough to be inside me, even though I am corrupt, I am sinful, I am everything bad. I have tried to run away from you since the dawn of creation in vain. Where can I go where you are not? Because even if I run away from you, who is inside me, thinking I can leave you behind, you are everywhere outside too. So, this is my situation, my Lord, that if I refuse to face you in my inside, I have to face you outside. I prefer to face you inside myself. Then, if that God asks you why, there is an answer, because the God who is outside me is a stern judge. The God inside me is me. If he punishes me, he punishes himself. So it is always better to appeal to the God inside than to the God outside. Therefore, we find this frustration that when we appeal to the God outside us in temples, in churches, there is either no answer or there is a negative answer. But there is no single example of a man who meditated and was not only fairly dealt with my God inside him, but generously dealt with by God inside him. Because otherwise it is like a father who tells his son, "My son, you have committed a mistake. You have to pay me 100 francs fine." And the son says, "Daddy, give me the money." He takes the money from the dad or the mother and returns the money as a fine to his own father. So, this is a secret of spirituality, not often revealed in books, in texts, that the God inside is our lover. He cannot be otherwise, because in a sense, He is me. He is inside me at the very center of my being, and anything that happens to me, in a sense, affects Him too. So, find this very encouraging feature in spirituality, that is, when we turn away from the external God, rise above religion, because mystically oriented. Seek Him in our hearts and approach Him there with love, reverence, and devotion. He not only forgives our sins or rewards our virtues, which is all that the gods of religion promise, but He makes us like Himself. So that is the secret of spirituality. That is the tremendous attraction of spirituality to those who know this fact, and is this truth which makes us persist with our spiritual practice. So I hope all of you will undertake this journey with faith, with confidence, recognizing His presence and perceiving this truth, that He is me and I am Him. All that was necessary was to realize this fact. Here we conclude this fifth talk. In the next narration, we will start our next talk. Thank you for listening. The next talk is titled The Yearning of the Heart.